I don't know how my brain works. Hello everyone, it's me Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Inspiration is a funny thing. It can hit you in so many different, unexpected, unusual ways. I don't know, our brains work like that somehow. I don't get it either. But I was thinking back on all of my old novels and the weird ways I was inspired to write them. So today you're going to hear those stories. I'm going to talk about how I was inspired to create and write all of my work. It's basically just an excuse to tell you all about my stories, really, but I'm a writer, I get to do that. The first novel I'm going to talk about is Nephilim. Nephilim has been the novel that I've worked on for the longest. It is currently in its 7th draft, and I say it's currently in the 7th draft, but what I really mean is there's something wrong with the story and I can't fix it, so we're gonna take it apart and we're gonna start over from scratch, basically, with the characters and the premise and the general plot I had for it, and just stick it all together and package it differently. Nephilim is a YA urban fantasy. It follows Ali, who discovers that she is a Nephilim. She's half angel, half human, and she agrees to become a part of this wider group of Nephilim who help prevent too much sin from coming into our world. Enter the ancient evil who is hunting the Nephilim, and now they must, you know, fight back where the rest of the angels are not. I remember vividly coming up with the story for this novel. It was really weird. When I was younger, I used to have a Word document of different words that I liked the sound of. Not that I would ever use those words, I liked the sound of the word. They were fun words, so I saved them to, I don't know, look at, I guess. But I came across the word seraphim once when I was dallying about on the internet, and I was like, oh, seraphim, that's a really cool word. I wonder what seraphim is. So enter me googling what is seraphim, going on to the Wikipedia page for it, and it turns out that seraphim is the name of one of the angels in Christianity, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. And so this led me into researching, you know, all of the angels that were within this angelic hierarchy, so-called, and that led me to learning about something called the Nephilim, which is sort of ingrained in this story of how fallen angels came to be. I think this was a few years ago that I researched all this. If anything is wrong, I'm so sorry, but this is what I remember. And I was like, oh, Nephilim, so they're like half angel, half human. Like, that's so cool. In the olden days, they were monsters who wreaked havoc on Earth, but then I went, modern day Nephilim. We're not going to say that angels stopped banging humans, you know, when all that stuff happened when the world began. No, they continued to do it. So Nephilim in the modern world, and that is how Nephilim came to be, or at least the initial premise of it. Doing more research, obviously, I discovered things like the different fallen angels, the different enemies that angels waged war on, and the whole thing sort of spiraled from there into a 4-book series I've only ever written 1.5 books for. But yeah, that is how I created Nephilim. That's how I came up with Nephilim. I will come back to it one day. I absolutely love the characters so much and everything about it. A beta reader actually did a mock cover for it as well. It's so pretty. So yeah, Nephilim is near and dear to my heart. It was the first novel that I ever said, I'm going to get this published. And one day I will, just slightly different than it is at the moment. The second project that I am going to talk about is Project Body Swap. This is one of my currents, guys. Project Body Swap is one of my favourite sort of plot lines that I've ever come up with. Like, I think it's such a cool concept that personally, someone who doesn't read very much has not come across. Yet again, subverting some tropes. Project Body Swap is a YA fantasy, again set in a magical world, who follows Noah. He is a poor boy, poor as in non-magical, born into a rich family, rich as in magical. And he's the only person in his family without any magic. And his family is a very, very important family. So he's not treated very well. And his only dream in life is to have magic. Enter Tasha, the wayward priestess who likes experimenting with her own magic and ignoring the rules, who tells Noah that she can give him magic with a spell that she found in some random book that has half of the pages ripped out of it. So naively, he agrees, she does the spell, but she accidentally bonds the two of them together. They can't be too far apart. Eventually they'll start feeling each other's emotions, their feelings, have access to their thoughts and, you know, knowledge that they don't know but the other person knows, and things like that. And eventually, we don't know when, the bond is fatal. So Tasha and Noah sneak out of their city without permission to go and find the cure, which they have been told does not exist anymore. But, and there's a but, because there is a third person bonded to them, Sephi. She is a mysterious rich person who somehow has bonded to all three of them, but she is within Tasha's body. So she and Tasha swap control of Tasha's body throughout the entirety of the novel. It's a lot of fun, it's a lot of hijinks. This came about when I was trying to think of a novel to write for NaNoWriMo in 2017. I was talking with my friend Tilly's Art, and I don't know, we were talking about the chosen one trope, I think, and one of us must have mentioned something along the lines of, I wonder what happens with everyone else, like what the chosen one's doing, whatever the chosen one's doing. And I was just like, that's my story. It's a story in a world where there is a chosen one, and the chosen one is currently going about fulfilling their prophecy, but this is a story of someone else who's doing something at the same time, who inadvertently does the chosen one's job. And then I added magical bonding together because I thought that was fun, and then I added the body swapping because I thought that'd just be hilarious, and it turned out I was right. So I'm very, very proud of that story. So yeah, a random conversation about, again, trying to subvert tropes and cliches led to Project Body Swap. Speaking of subverting tropes and cliches, that is exactly how I came about creating Project Fae. Project Fae is a YA urban fantasy set in Ireland, firmly set in Ireland. It follows Kinley. She is a fairy. She is a very, very important fairy. She's a member of the Floral, who are like second to the Queen, and she doesn't like her life. It's very boring. It's very full of schedule. She doesn't have any freedom to do what she wants. She finds out that she's going to be taking part in this very big ceremony where she will get to leave her home, the Under-Earth, and serve the Queen, which, yay, she's leaving, but she's still got to serve the Queen, which she doesn't like to do. She finds out one evening that she is a changeling, a human changeling. She was stolen from Earth when she was a newborn and brought to the fairy world. So she's whole world flipped upside down. She decides that before she has to be roped into servitude for her entire life, she's going to go to the human world and she's going to find her fairy counterpart, just because she's very, very curious, which is not as easy as she thinks it is. And the Queen is not happy that she has left, so the Queen is doing whatever it takes to get her back, but Kinley is sort of refusing to until she has done what she needs to do. You can clearly see how I subverted the trope with this. It's not a human finding out they're a fairy, it's a fairy finding out they're a human. Because every fairy book I see is it's a human who discovers that they're a fairy in secret. Or just a human getting roped into the fairy world. Trope subverted. I don't know why I like doing it so much. I think, especially with YA, there are so many tropes and cliches. They're very, very tiring to us. Like, we've seen it all before. And I don't know, doing tropes and cliches differently makes things a little bit more interesting for the reader, and they're like, oh, this is a little bit new, so, you know, hopefully they find it a little bit more interesting. That's why I like doing this, guys. Yeah. Let's talk about Project Floral. This is a shelved novel. I shelved it like straight away. This is my 2019 NaNoWriMo novel. This is what I wrote on 95,000 words for in 30 days last year. It's a YA fantasy. You can see the trend I've got going with all of these fantasies, don't you? Set again in a magical world. God knows if I'm going to remember any of the names of the characters, but this world is sustained by a magical light which is cast down by the queen, the main queen. There are 5 queens in this island with the 5 kingdoms. One day that light disappears and the country starts dying, so the princess and 2 random people that she meets need to travel across country to one of the other kingdoms to discover why this light is fading and how to bring it back to save the country. It was too big for me. It was too big and none of it made sense, so it's been shelved. I've stolen the magical elements from it already for a new novel, so it's not like I can even go back and write it if I wanted to. But this is the weirdest way that I've ever come up with a novel in my entire life. I was walking home with the kids one day and it was summer and we were talking about bees. And one of my sons turned around and said, well, there's no girl bees. And I was like, no, there is. There's a queen bee. Queen bees exist. And then I was just like, queen bee. And somehow this story spurted from it. I don't understand how. I don't know why queen bee suddenly inspired me to write a book about queens. I don't know what went on in my brain there. I did some brainstorming and things like that and did word association with the word queen and the word bee, and then somehow this story formed just from that, just from me going, it's a queen bee. I don't understand how. I'm going to take a quick moment to talk about Project Theft. Not that I quite remember how I came up with the story for this novel, but it is what I call a recycled novel. It uses recycled characters from an old project, and it also uses recycled magical elements from a second project that I sort of smushed together to create this one big project, which is one of the novels that I'm writing for NaNoWriMo this year. Project Theft is a... Go on, say it. It's a YA urban fantasy. You were correct. It follows Lane. Lane is magical. Lane lives in London. Lane's brother is kidnapped and Lane uses her magical powers they track him to a street that doesn't exist. This is a magical street that once you go in, you can't get back out. And her brother is here somewhere, so she begrudgingly enlists the help of a group of criminals to help her find him and escape the street. But unbeknownst to her, these criminals are using her and her magical powers for their own agenda. So I honestly don't remember how I came up with this story. The initial story that I took the characters from share some very vague similarities in plot. There's a character in there called Cambry who's a thief, and Cambry is the only one who can travel between the 2 worlds that was in the first novel. And I liked that element, that she's sort of like smuggling magic to and from. So I wanted to keep that sort of same, she's smuggling magic. So the story needed to be set in a place where she could exit, but other people couldn't. So I think that's how the street formed. It's very similar to the street in Doctor Who, actually. Can't remember the name of the Doctor, but it's one of the episodes with Maisie Williams as me. Where the street and the clock on the back of the neck, that one, yeah. And finally, we're going to talk about Abingdon House. Abingdon House is my middle grade. Ooh, my first middle grade. It's a magical realism novel about this girl called Hazel who discovers that the grandmother she didn't know existed has died, and she has become the head of the magical house of Abingdon. And the rest of the heads of the other houses don't want someone young to, take such an important seat. So they give her 3 trials to complete, and if she completes them, she can ascend, and if she doesn't complete them, she fails, she doesn't ascend. So the story is essentially her trying to complete these 3 trials in order to prove her worth and there's someone trying to sabotage her doing so. Simply Abingdon House. I'm also writing that for NaNoWriMo this year. Bloody struggle, I tell you that now. I don't actually remember how I came up with the idea for Abingdon House. There wasn't some sudden burst of inspiration for a word, or me purposely trying to subvert any tropes or anything like that. All I knew at the time that I remember was I wanted this girl to be magical and to discover something. But I didn't want the entire conversation of, oh, you're really magical and here's a secret magical world that you're now a part of. Like, I didn't want to have that conversation. I didn't. So I turned the book into a magical realism where all of these magical elements already exist and everybody knows they already exist. And then she discovers that she's part of something important within that world. And then I think I did some brainstorming and that was it. So it was more me thinking about what I didn't want to write, and then what was left is how I came up with Abingdon House. It's really weird. It's really weird how your mind works. You never expect to be inspired by certain things, but it just happens. It's really annoying, but it's also sort of fun, I guess. We'll see. So that was me talking about what inspired the majority of the novels that I have ever written. Let me know down in the comments below, what is the weirdest inspiration story that you have? How do you go about getting inspired when you are feeling demotivated? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Good thoughts and happy writing.